Howdy y'all, my name is Dave, this is the Anime Field Guide podcast, and you are listening to the Studio Rundown. This is my series where I take you through the history and business practices of anime production houses across Japan. Today we are hopping on the roller coaster that is the tale of Studio GONZO. GONZO was founded by former Gainax co-founders and staffers. They left the company during the dry period of the early 90s, basically after the conclusion of Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, during that time when Gainax didn't have a major anime project until 1995's Neon Genesis Evangelion. Of course, no disrespect to Otaku no Video. But these founders are Shinji Higuchi, who is a key creative figure in planning for Neon Genesis Evangelion, as well as being the namesake for Shinji Ikari. But he's mostly known for his work in live action and special effects, and so he's mainly known now for the two movies, Shin Godzilla and Shin Ultraman, over at Studio Kara with Hideaki Anno. We also have Mahiro Maeda, who was started as an animator at Studio Ghibli before moving to Gainax, where he was a prolific designer across several of Gainax's chief properties, from Gunbuster, Nadia, Evangelion, and also subsequently a major creative force and director for the various projects that he helmed during his time at GONZO. In addition, we have Hiroshi Yamaguchi, who is not a Gainax staffer, but he did meet Shinji Higuchi and Hideaki Anno while in college. He is a scriptwriter and a novelist, so he did participate in the script and screenplay for Nadia, Evangelion, etc., series composition and advisor roles across several of GONZO works, so Blue Submarine No. 6, Rosario and Vampire, Desert Punk, along with a wide array across several studios of various scripting and screenplay credits. We also have novelizations that he wrote of Mobile Suit Gundam Stardust Memory, Giant Robo, Armored Troopers Votoms, and Mobile Battleship Nadeshiko. Last but not least, we have Shoji Murahama, who served as the first president and representative director for GONZO, while Higuchi, Maeda, and Yamaguchi remained in a more like a freelance capacity. But initially, he dropped out of college to join Gainax as a producer, and he was there from the beginning with Royal Space Force, and was basically there through Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water. Shoji Murahama initially imagined this new company as a band of ruffians. Therefore, the name GONZO means ruffian in Italian. So as far as the early years, GONZO got its start with anime sequences and FMVs for video games. We have Lunar, Silver Star Story, so that was 1996 on the Sega Saturn, Lunar 2, Sky Gunner, Radiant Silver Gun, King of Fighters, Dream Match, 1999, Genso Suiko Kaiden, so one of the spin-offs of the Suikoden games. They did volumes 1 and 2 in 1999 and 2001 respectively, with more of those credits to come later. This is chiefly the early years. In 1996, Shoji Murahama established GONZO's first subsidiary, Digimation. Murahama and Maeda aggressively championed digital animation effects and production techniques in a time when the late 90s and anime production was still primarily dominated by cell animation. And so a man who will be important later to the story, Shinichiro Ishikawa, was Digimation's president beginning in 1999. Blue Submarine was pretty groundbreaking for its time, and this is the show that put GONZO on the map in a big way, as well as another feather in Mahiro Maeda's cap in his early directing career. And of course, while time and developments of technology have not been kind to the visuals of Blue Submarine, it is nevertheless an important step into the development of the modern anime landscape as we see it today. So shortly after Blue Submarine, we have May 1999, where GONZO went corporate, establishing GONZO Company Limited, and an important date, February 22nd, 2000, is the restructuring to GONZO Digimation Holding Company. So both GONZO and Digimation are now subsidiaries under this holding company, which really marks the beginning of the GONZO as we would generally know it today. GONZO's first television series was the anime original Gatekeepers, releasing around March 2000. It's an action comedy with teenagers piloting mechs against an alien force called The Invaders. This also got a sequel OVA series in 2002 with an all-new cast. Their second original series enjoyed more success, as well as numerous sequel entries. I've already mentioned it. It was Van Dread in 2001, created and directed by Takeshi Mori, who was previously a storyboarder at Gainax, and then with GONZO, he directed the Melty Lancer OVAs. Vandred is a space opera mecha battle of the sexes, man versus women in outer space with a goofball screw-up hero stuck at the center. The first television series began in October of 2000, with its sequel Vandred Second Stage in October of 2001. Both TV series got a one-episode summary OVA in January of 2001 and October of 2002, respectively. In July of 2001, GONZO premiered their first manga-to-television anime adaptation, the 13-episode Samurai Girl Real Bout High School. So it's a fan service action show featuring character designs by Keiji Goto, the character designer of Negdeshiko, as well as making headlines briefly around 2004 as Tokyo Pop announced a live-action film project starring Melissa Joan Hart, which it's a project that never saw the light of day. Capping off 2001 are two other entries of particular note. We have Hellsing, the other manga adaptation, again 13 episodes, the popular and very violent vampire action manga by Kota Hirano, incredible amount of violence and gore, in which a vampire lord, Alucard, and his assistant, Ceres Victoria, are tasked with the extermination of Nazi vampires with extreme prejudice. GONZO's adaptation was mostly replaced by Madhouse's The Hellsing Ultimate OVA series, but still remains in the conversation, I think, amongst the fandom. It's kind of a similar situation to Full Metal Alchemist and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Each series has their strengths, but of course also in 2001 was the infamous Final Fantasy Unlimited. So Squaresoft at this time was trying to establish Final Fantasy as a multimedia franchise. We're suddenly a film studio now. But of course, the resulting products, most notably the Spirits Within, were massive critical and commercial failures. And so Final Fantasy Unlimited, while not exactly widely panned by critics, it's fine, but Unlimited was mainly caught in the financial fallout of the Spirits Within, and so production ran into numerous issues with funding and things, and had its episode count slashed from 52 to 25. Full Metal Panic, another manga adaptation, and the first adaptation of the popular high school sci-fi action comedy, and this came out in 2002 after being pushed back initially due to the September 11th attacks in 2001. GONZO's approach to Full Metal Panic was more of the serious and somber side of the work, but of course nowadays it's another series that's better known as produced by Kyoto Animation with Fumofu and Full Metal Panic The Second Raid, which was more on the zany comedy sides of the series with the serious tones acting as more of a counterweight. Beginning in August of 2002 and concluding in August of 2005, we had a 5-episode OVA series, Yukikaze. This is a co-production with GONZO, Victor Entertainment, and Bandai Visual as a 20th anniversary project for Bandai Visual. Ikikaze is based on a series of novels where the premise is essentially Top Gun fighter jets meet Independence Day. The dogfight scenes at the time were choreographed with the help of the Japan Air Self-Defense Force. October 2002, Masami Obari created and directed the super robot anime series Gravion, as well as its sequel Gravion Zwei in 2004, January 2004. And also around this time, before I get too much into the 2000s, there are some more business things to cover, because in April of 2002, GONZO and Digimation were merged into one company, now just called GONZO Digimation Company Limited, but it's still under the GDH holding company. Nevertheless, GONZO Digimation has its own separate list of credits, which include Kitty Grade, beginning its run in October of 2002. It's another show about spaceship battles and sexy girls. We also have Chrono Crusade, an action comedy in late 2003, featuring a sexy nun with guns who fights demons. Burst Angel, directed by Koichi Ohada of Gunbuster fame. Again, more sexy girls with guns. Kaleido Star, which was created and directed, at least the first half, by Junichi Sato of Sailor Moon, Princess Tutu, and Prettier fame. Kaleido Star follows a young girl named Sora, who leaves Japan for the United States in order to perform acrobatics at the prestigious carnival company, the Kaleido Stage. Kaleido Star got a sequel OVA series in 2004 and 2005, respectively, as well as a prequel OVA in 2006, all of them produced by GONZO and GONZO Digimation. Elsewhere on the business front, as we enter the back half of the 2000s, in November of 2003, GONZO established a music licensing subsidiary, Future Vision Music. In 2004, the GONZO Digimation Holding Company was shortened. The company was just renamed to GDH. And the same year, GDH was listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, and they went on a fundraising spree, including venture capital funds, as well as rapid business expansion into London and Los Angeles to directly promote and license GONZO anime properties to the Western world. This new influx of cash also kicked off a round of, say it with me now, mergers and acquisitions. In July of 2005, they established a subsidiary aimed at children's animation. This company's name is GONZO. September 2005 was the acquisition of Warpgate Online Gaming, which was renamed to Gonzo Rosso Online in December of 2005. February of 2006, they established a support studio in Korea named GK Entertainment. GONZO also began to heavily promote anime on streaming services. They signed a deal with Animax Asia in June of 2006, as well as being an early supporter of the Crunchyroll website. This is late 2008, early 2009, because GONZO, especially like 2005 through generally like 2008, 2009, they just went on a tear. They picked up more adaptation work in 2004, with the loose anime adaptation of the famous Akira Kurosawa samurai film Samurai 7. But this time, the 7 samurai are fighting with mechs. We have another novel adaptation of Basilisk, spring 2005, that covers the renewed conflict between the rival Koga and Iga ninja clans. We have the light novels Trinity Blood in spring of 2005. This is a post-apocalyptic vampire action series. The author of Trinity Blood unfortunately passed away before the first episode, or like around the time the first episode was completed. But the family estate was all in favor of the anime adaptation coming out. And there was a similar story with Kaze no Stigma in spring of 2007 anime. This takes place in a world of elemental spirit wielders. You've got air, water, earth, fire, with the fire clan being chief among them. But they have this dirty little secret, as the chief's son, Kazuma, was banished from the family, but Kazuma has now returned 4 years later and is suspiciously close to a string of murders involving Fire Clan members. But his cousin Ayano believes in Kazuma's innocence. Though their personalities mix like oil and water, they gotta put aside their differences and find the real culprit. So Kaze no Stigma was one of those series with the potential to take off, but I mention it's a similar situation to Trinity Blood because the author, Takahiro Yamato, passed away from leukemia in 2009, leaving the light novel series and really any prospects of a continuation, anime or otherwise, unfinished. Getting into the manga adaptations now, again beginning around 2004, we have Desert Punk. Japan is a desert wasteland populated by shrimpy bounty hunters and again, girls with guns. It's a winning formula. As well as Gantz, which bills itself as its extremely graphic sci-fi horror death game anime series. Not the best reputation in terms of the adaptation work. I think it really fell short. We also have Welcome to the NHK, following a socially withdrawn protagonist getting the shock to his system as a cute girl gets him into all sorts of wacky situations. It's an exploration of otaku culture and other weird fringes of society. And then we have 2 shows, both in spring 2007. We have Bokurano, which is kind of like an underrated gem, I think, of Gonzo's catalog. This is the super robot piloted by a group of children, but with a tragic twist. Opposite it is the wacky romantic comedy My Bride is a Mermaid. In 2005, we have the directorial debut of Shin Itagaki and Gonzo's first Shonen Jump adaptation, Who Here Remembers Black Cat, based on the manga by Kentaro Yabuki, before he penned his much more famous work To Love Aru. Black Cat follows the exploits of Train Hartnett, a former assassin turned bounty hunter, with his merry band of misfits as they take on various odd jobs and, of course, clash with his former employers, the Chronos Numbers. Another one, although this one from a monthly Jump, we have the anime adaptation of Rosario and Vampire, where a normal guy gets enrolled at Yokai Academy, the school for monsters, and instantly falls in love with the cute vampire girl with a dangerous secret. Going into original anime series, a lot of these are sci-fi superpowers or spaceships. So these include Speedgrafter, Salty Ray, Glass Fleet, their first film, Origin Spirits of the Past, in 2006. But we have April 2003's Last Exile, which was produced for Gonzo's 10th anniversary and still remains, I think, one of their premier titles. This reunited the chief creative team from Blue Submarine, and this time they were to produce an original anime to leverage the latest in CG technology for a steampunk airship political thriller in which 2 young pilots are dragged into a complex political chess match between 2 warring nations who are secretly controlled by a third faction, the Guild. and the guild is after a secret something, a special MacGuffin, in a deadly region of airspace called the Grand Stream. But no one has the ship or skills that can survive the harsh winds, except for maybe one, the mysterious battleship Sylvana, crewed by a band of rebels who oppose the guild's iron-fisted rule. Another notable original anime series in the 2000s, of course, this is October 2004's Gankutsuo, the Count of Monte Cristo, reimagined as a space opera coupled with a striking visual design, namely in the clothing patterns. And it's one of the highlights, I think, of Maehiro Maeda's career, despite the very now outdated CG effects. But again, the art direction, I think, remains very striking, and I don't think it's really been replicated since, except maybe another anime series, Mononoke, which is a woodblock texture or a woodblock print. But really, I don't see anything else that's really done exactly what Gankutsuo was able to pull off. We have Spring 2007's Romeo x Juliet, a swords and sorcery fantasy spin on the Shakespeare's A Classic Tragedy. Spring 2008's Blasreiter, in collaboration with Nitro Plus, where biomechanical creatures called demoniacs can inhabit objects like cars, motorcycles, and they attack the humans. The demoniacs are policed by a specialized assault team wielding similar powers. At the same time the television run was happening, they were airing the anime on I believe the Nitro Plus YouTube channel, as well as Funimation got this show. In addition, we have manga adaptations of GONZO properties being produced at this time. Most of these were released under Kadokawa's umbrella of companies, with Kodansha and others mixed in, and then Tokyo Pop got a lot of these. So we had like Van Dread, Romeo Juliet, Kitty Grade, Speed Grapher, Red Garden, Blasreiter, Burst Angel, and then like Kodansha picked up Gankutsuo. We also have an interesting partnership with Top Cow Productions, which Top Cow was an imprint by Image Comics, in which GONZO did a Japanese anime version of the comic Witchblade that came out in spring 2006. Witchblade follows the clumsy amnesiac Amaha Masane and her adoptive daughter Rihoko. For some reason, the government is after Rihoko, and so Masane becomes entangled in the power struggle between large corporations and a government agency, and through all of this, she acquires a mysterious bracelet that transforms her into the legendary Witchblade. And also on the subject of partnerships, we of course have to mention Afro Samurai, the 5-episode series in 2007. This is the stylish and very bloody samurai revenge plot along the lines of like Kill Bill, and notable for having voice work provided by Samuel L. Jackson, and also airing on Spike TV first before anywhere else. And we also have the dungeon-crawling fantasy anime Tower of Jiraga in 2008 and its sequel in 2009, based on the game series by Bandai Namco. Continuing on, we have music videos. GONZO did some animation sequences for various music videos. The big one, of course, Breaking the Habit by Linkin Park in 2004, which the music video won the MTV Music Award. We also have Freedom by Bloodstained Child in 2007, and then Forsaken by Dream Theater in 2008. And going back to the video game FMVs and anime sequences, from 2001 basically through 2010, we have Suikoden 3, Super Street Fighter 4, Phantasy Star Zero, Sky Gunner, Zone of the Enders, the second runner, Summon Night X, Tears Crown, as well as the home console versions of Blaze Blue, Calamity Trigger, and Blaze Blue Continuum Shift. However, despite all of this positive front-facing by GONZO, at the time we could clearly see major cracks forming along the facade, and by 2009 GONZO was in a financial freefall. And so let's break it down. The first and one of the main factors I can point to is pretty easy. I mean, GDH, the parent company, was making several money moves to expand their reach. There was a ton of investment, but then there were various financial collapses. The anime industry rapidly shrank during the late 2000s. At one point, GONZO was producing more than a dozen TV series a year, so a lot of their original series and things underperformed, plus they were doing a lot of risky and sometimes very expensive experimental stuff. So that was that's just an easy one to call out right there, as well as a major talent drain, a number of them over the years. But the big one I want to talk about is Koji Kajita, again the first president of GONZO, and various other staffers. They left the studio in 2007 due to various disagreements with the aggressive direction that the company had been taking. And so Koji Kajita and others formed David Productions, the studio that gives us the new JoJo Bizarre Adventure series. The company also had direct licensing routes to Geneon and Funimation, course, Geneon's closure further contributed to this deficit, even with Funimation picking up some of their slack. And so in the meantime, Ishikawa stepped up to replace Koji Kajita. And in the intervening years, basically from 2006 through 2009 or so, was running consecutive, like 3+ years at a loss, which of course does not make your venture capitalist investors happy. GONZO was delisted from the Japan Stock Exchange, or GDH, was listed from the Japan Stock Exchange in 2009 and subsequently underwent a major reorg as GDH merged with GONZO Digimation to go to the resulting company was just named GONZO in April of 2009. So all of this is just one company. They were still allowed to produce animation, but as you might expect from something like this, the output is noticeably low. But they still put out some TV series. So we had Shangri-La in spring 2009, based on the light novels and manga from the New Type magazine. The 2010s are very quiet by comparison. They were mostly attached to projects under work assistance, but were gradually building themselves back up to sustainability. So Ishikawa notably remained with GONZO as its vice president. In 2012, GONZO established a support studio in Okinawa. They just called it Okinawa GONZO. 2013, they produced the samurai action movie Rio, and of course earlier was 2011's Last Exile Fam the Silver Wing, in its movie in 2016. GONZO continued to dip their toes into video game anime. We have Blade and Soul, which was originally made by NCSoft, but the more notable movie project from this time was, of course, Bayonetta Bloody Fate. Came out in November 2013, and this movie has a solid enough foundation, but with GONZO at this time, it's more mixed reviews because there are just a lot of shortcuts taken with the action scene. So it's one of those that had the potential, but maybe just not quite the talent pool or the resources to exactly execute on that vision that I think Bayonetta deserved. Further adaptations include the detective light novel comedy Dog and Scissors, which came out in summer of 2013, the romance manga The Town Where You Live in summer 2013, plus its 2 OVA specials, and the 4-panel comedy manga Seiyu's Life. This came out around summer of 2015. It's 4 girls trying to make it as voice actors, and they get into various comedic situations. And so by 2016, as GONZO was beginning to warm back up, they were acquired by Asatsu DK Holding Company. And this was, they acquired GONZO as a subsidiary with the purpose of expanding the anime offerings. And GONZO was now existed as a cog in a larger corporate machines. However, they didn't really get the promised support, as it were, because ADK had its own financial issues, again, that they were worrying about. And so during this time, we have more video game anime. They produced an anime for Akiba's Trip the Animation 18F, and also Conception, which is one of the worst anime of 2018. However, 2018 was also the year of one of GONZO's most popular shows of this period, Kakuryou, Bed and Breakfast for Spirits. We follow a female college student, Aoi. She can see spirits and is suddenly visited by the god of the Heavenly Inn, and she is whisked away to the spirit realm in order to pay off her late grandfather's debts. But rather than marry this god as payment, Aoi declares that she will pay off her grandfather's debts by the profits from working at the inn. 2018 was also Space Battleship Tiramisu. Autumn of 2018, they animated a 10-episode web series, Saint Seiya Saintia Sho, which was a spin-off from Masami Kurumada's flagship Shonen Jump manga, of course, Saint Seiya. Also, another underrated entry, Hinamaru Sumo, which was a sports manga in Weekly Shonen Jump. However, all of this wasn't enough. Coupled with the lack of support from ADK Holdings, in addition to their parent company's financial scandal of improper tax filings in 2018, Ishikawa stepped up as GONZO's president in September of 2018 after the company posted an over 500 million yen loss, which prompted the sell-off of various assets, including the games division, the music division, as well as the dissolution of the Okinawa GONZO studio. And by June of 2019, ADK Holdings established Studio Kai as their own internal animation production house, with GONZO transferring over portions of its anime production, intellectual property, and rights management businesses over to Studio Kai. GONZO still produced an anime during this time. The main series of note is the Netflix partnership in 2019's 7 Seeds. And then this got a second season, but that was animated by Studio Kai in March of 2020. 7 Seeds was received well enough, but the final projects of GONZO are the largely panned sports anime Tri Nights in 2019, and in 2020 we have Phantasy Star Online 2 episode Oracle. In March of 2020, Shinichiro Ishikawa bought back the shares for the GONZO company from ADK, establishing himself and GONZO as an independent entity. However, one of the conditions was that GONZO was not allowed to produce animation for the next 3 years, and that it basically expired in August of 2023. GONZO did not produce any kind of anime projects for the next 5 years. Now, they did announce some projects, namely in 2021, GONZO and Ishikawa announced a crypto NFT project, Samurai Cryptos, which creatively is another play on the Seven Samurai concept. They also held a crowdfunding campaign on September 11th, 2022, again, to celebrate their 30 years as a company, as well as, again, heavily promoting Samurai Cryptos. Shinichiro's Q&A session at the San Japan convention in Texas in 2023, it was one of those of, hey, I'm here to talk about Studio GONZO. What would you guys like to see from us? We have some things in the hopper, we promise, but we cannot say anything at this time. Stay tuned for announcements. And so after August of 2023, GONZO was now allowed to produce animation projects again, but things were still kind of quiet until November of 2024. GONZO and Studio Enlight announced a partnership with Spider-Verse co-director Peter Ramsey for 2 projects. So they are going to produce Ripper, which is a animated / live-action hybrid thriller noir film, and a sci-fi adventure series Hotaru. GONZO also announced their return to television anime with Season 2 of 2018's Kakuryo Bed and Breakfast for Spirits, which recently aired in fall 2025. So as of right now, GONZO is officially back in the anime business. So where do we go from here? GONZO built an early reputation of being risk-takers and innovators, new approaches to productions, new forms of distribution, new animation styles, all of this stuff. But with all the innovation and risk-taking came all sorts of management issues and business volatility. GONZO always seemed to be making headlines for doing some weird new thing, which made checking out some of their shows an interesting experience. And again, they produced just a lot of shows, some notable hits, but most of their catalog was average to middling in terms of critical reception. They would swing wide, and quite a lot of their efforts would fall flat. As a personal anecdote from being a fan during this time, GONZO's reputation was they have the potential to make something amazing, but most of the time it's a crapshoot. Their shows will start off with 4 to 6 great episodes and then kind of meander along for the remaining 20, always teasing you of major developments and payoffs to reach the height of what was promised at the start, but maybe they'll deliver, maybe they're not. GONZO would also make headlines for legendary stinkers like Glass Fleet, Conception, Final Fantasy Unlimited. The ones goes on, speaking of added stink, the whole crypto NFT project. No matter what excuse was given, Samurai Cryptos just smacks of a desperation play, which, I mean, it absolutely is. But in the same breath, it's clear that Shinichiro Ishikawa and crew are a scrappy bunch, and it's clear he wanted to keep creating no matter what. And through it all, I mean, at the end of the day, GONZO is still standing, and they are seemingly back in business for what I hope will be a steady lineup of quality titles, beginning with Fall 2025's Kakuryo Season 2, of which reviews have been mixed. Will this new company build a lasting legacy, or are some old habits just too stubborn to let go? Either way, it's probably going to make for some good headlines. Thank you for listening.